Hello, this is the final budget report presentation. My name is Brian York. This is for William Wood's EDU528, Financing the Athletic and Activities Budget. Again, I apologize. I've got a little bit of a cold that I'm getting over, so please bear with me in that. In creating this budget and working through this assignment, I felt the most important and first priority was to come up with a split of the $100,000 budget that was equitable among the sports and especially within the two genders of what would be considered the same sport. In other words, I wanted to make sure that if I had an upset parent who felt their child's sport was being overlooked in the budgeting process or even a Title IX inquiry, I could defend my budget with transparent thinking. And I'll show you my spreadsheet. This is the spreadsheet that I created. It lists all the sports that we were assigned to do. In many cases, it's grouped by the male-female equivalent, boys and girls basketball. I did group baseball and softball, boys and girls track and field, boys and girls soccer. I also grouped boys wrestling with girls volleyball because their numbers are roughly similar, and there is no gender equivalent on our assignment. Boys and girls golf, boys and girls tennis, boys and girls swimming, boys and girls cross country, and then football, dance, and cheer have no gender equivalences, therefore they're kind of their own deal. And the way I wanted to break this apart is I looked at my high school, Hickman High School, their participation in these events, and thus came up with a total of 623 total athletes across all sports. And then by combining each of those sports like I talked about with the boys and girls equivalences, came up with a participant per sport. And so there's 60 kids that play basketball. There's 80 kids that play baseball or softball. There's 112 kids that run track and so on. And then found the percent of the total athletes for each of them. By finding that percent, I allocated roughly that percent of the $100,000 to that sport. Then by doing that, I looked at how much money each sport would get if it wasn't gender equitable. Like the boys basketball, since they have more participants at that portion of the money, should get roughly $5,800, while the girls basketball team would get $3,800. By combining those two amounts and then splitting it in half, the boys and girls program each get $4,815, which per kid is less for the boys program and more for the girls program. But again, we have to follow Title IX and make sure that that's equitable. So I'll mention this later, but that's where you kind of hope that the boys and girls coaches get along and are in good graces with each other so that they can share equipment, and the girls might buy something that's expensive one year and then the boys will buy it next year and they'll all share. Now, something I did that was a little different, once I did find that money per sport, I took $63, which sounds kind of random, but I wanted to take enough but not take too much, and it was a lot of playing with numbers. Honestly, I spent a couple hours just on that trying to figure that out. But by taking out $63 per athlete from each sport, that created what I call the uniform fund. You can see that on the bottom in the teal highlight. That takes $35,311 out of the $100,000 and leaves just under $65,000. But that also allows me to create that uniform fund. And again, on my next to last column, I calculated the approximate cost of one set of uniforms for each sport, either home or away. As you can see, that grand total of uniforms is a little over $60,000. By doing that with the uniform fund, even accounting for inflation, shipping, other things that might add to the cost, maybe an increase in participation, we can replace a home or away uniform for every sport every 2 years, which gives you a 4-year complete recycle, which is pretty good from what I've seen in various high schools. And then that leaves each sport with an amount for their wish list. Here's my spreadsheet that gives my total cost for boys basketball. As Ty and Mike mentioned, we all did. We wrote our wish list as if we were starting a new program, and uniforms were a top priority. And I've already explained how I kind of created a uniform fund, as well as the fact that I'm dealing with an established program, so there isn't a real need for brand new uniforms. So I did like how they mentioned team backpacks. We need that. Our program doesn't have that. Again, replacing basketballs, getting shooting shirts for the kids, and a ball rack. In talking to our boys coach, this was the list he would have gone with the budget that we had. As we move into girls basketball, our specific team had several basketballs stolen last year, lost, whatever you want to call it. And then the locking ball cage and the larger number of basketballs, again, backpacks for the entire team. But here's the advantage of not having as many athletes but still having the same budget. You can get extra things like the stationary defender that I hope they'll share with the boys program, the ankle braces that I hope they might share with the boys program, the slip knot refills, and then the shooting rim. These are similar to what the boys program, but different. And again, the differences I hope that we'll get to share. Baseball is actually one that I did the wish list for, as well as Brett. I thought we were both along the same lines. He did include catching equipment and team bats. I will say that here in Columbia, the catchers all have their own equipment, and my son's best friend is a catcher, and he's really picky, and he likes the way his personal equipment fits, and that's what he wants. Similarly, that we don't have team bats. They do. I could very easily see in an emerging program where they might want that, or maybe even with the cost of bats and gear in a lower income area that might be important. But these were the things I came up with. And again, my biggest expense was game baseballs. For those of you that know Hickman High School, its baseball field has one of the main streets in town, Providence Road, on the first base line, about 30 feet literally off the baseline, maybe 50 feet. Then third base is about 150 feet from a residential street. So we go through a ton of game baseballs, even though we try to get them back. L screens wear out, bow nets wear out, the Tanner tees wear out, the Jaeger bands wear out. Basically, in talking to our coach, these are things that we want to get on a regular basis. He did mention that if we had extra money to buy an iPad for the program so that we could use other things like have a program iPad to use, Game Changer, and other things like that. Here's where we move into track. And again, if we're getting backpacks, let's do it for the whole program. Now, we can't afford to get the entire track program a new backpack every year, but we did get some. I also liked Chris's list where he mentioned the thermal hoodie. Track at the beginning of the year is flat out cold. Here in Missouri, they often start the last week of February, first week of March, so yeah, they need that heat. Stopwatches for coaches are kind of like pens at the bank. They always disappear, end up broken, so yeah, let's get more of those every year. We are running out of, our starting blocks are starting to need to be replaced. Shot puts seem to need to be replaced every year, same with discuses. I'd throw a javelin in there if I had a little extra money. Tape measures, again, go kind of like with stopwatches. They get used, abused, and thrown away sometimes. I will say that the great idea of a crossbar is good. It just so happened that we broke some of ours at Hickman High School. So as we go on to girls track and field, again, this is similar. Backpacks, hoodies, stopwatches, because you can never have too many stopwatches, and honestly, 3 per program gives 6 for the coaches, and we've got a lot more than 6 coaches, so that'll also help. Again, since we have fewer girls, that's where we get into the training hurdles, and hopefully, again, the boys and girls teams can share. So that's where we're looking at for that. I was going to say, now we move on to boys and girls soccer. Boys soccer, again, I like the team bag backpack idea. We need some more training discs. Something that wasn't on the Andy and Casey's and Austin's list was something called a Corver goal, where it's basically just a giant metal rectangle with a net put on it. It's a portable goal that's full size. And then something that Andy mentioned, if I remember correctly, pug goals, little pop-up goals that are basically little goals on tension rods. Again, I kind of split between boys and girls, where it's basically the same thing. I did like how Andy mentioned the Huddle subscription, especially if I could get that on the soccer field on the dime for the girls' soccer, and then split it with the other groups like football and boys soccer and anyone else that uses that field. As we move into wrestling, I'll be honest, this is probably the sport I know the absolute least about. So I kind of just went straight along with what was recommended by Larry. I understand the need for cleanliness and hygiene. So yeah, let's make sure we do that. With the money we have left over, yeah, I want to continue that team bag. That's kind of why it's at the bottom of the list. And then getting at least one practice mat, and then again, if our budget expands, getting more. With volleyball, I kind of went along with Maria's recommendation. I do know from purchasing balls for our middle school program, 30 is the minimum for the custom balls with the custom colors and school logos and such. So I did want to get 30 balls, even though I don't think we need to replace 30 at a time. I do like the bungee blocker, the ball cart. Our school specifically needs a new match net and antenna, and then the team backpacks. Football is by far the most expensive sport per person, as well as having the most people involved in it. In that sense, I did feel a little sorry for the way I allocated the money to them, but at the same time, football also brings in the most money from boosters, and on a combination budget, they can get their larger ticket supplies through those channels. Trent's list mentioned having practice jerseys. I understand that desire, but with limited funds, we can use the retired sets of game jerseys, and honestly, that's what our school and the schools in Columbia do. I did have them order some of the Guardian protective helmets, because those are extremely important for the safety and well-being of our students. I agree with him. It's extremely important with the cost of shoulder pads and helmets to always replace some. Always keep that moving, always have some rotating in and out, because otherwise, if you need to replace 100 helmets in 1 year, holy cow, it'd be 50 grand just for helmets. So yeah, I'm not doing that. Again, similar to what was said, you need to constantly be replacing game balls, practice balls, and mouthpieces. And then we get to cheer. Cheer is honestly the one I thought was most interesting, because since Misha only considers it an activity, at least in Columbia Public Schools, cheer gets no sport money. They have to do all their own fundraising and out of pocket for parents. So this is kind of interesting. Now, knowing that and knowing what I paid as a cheer parent for 4 years here at Hickman High School, the pom-poms need to be replaced every year, especially if they're used hard or in bad weather. The hair bows need to be replaced every year. The duffel bag needs to be replaced every year. It gets cold in the fall season. Get that quarter zip. And then once we take care of the individuals, get that cheer mat. It's not as big, not the biggest one, but it is one. And then unfortunately, the shoes and a couple other things are just going to still have to fall on the parent. But I did include cheer uniforms in the uniform replacement, so that is one good thing for them. The last few sports, softball, boys and girls golf, boys and girls tennis, swimming, cross country, dance, no one did those specifically, so I did have to guess on my own. I did have a sheet for them. If you'd like, I can send you a link to the spreadsheet and show you what I have. Otherwise, if there are any questions, feel free to email and ask. Have a nice day.